You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Thore Dankert, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom. Hi, Thore. Thore? How do you want to say your name?
You can call me Thor.
Thor. So
Yeah.
I'll say Thor. I'll try to remember that today.
Yeah, like the god of thunder.
So I think that's also the right level of ambition for this talk today. So today I have the God of Thunder, Thore Dankert, on my podcast, and I'm really happy to bid you welcome to The Only Constant, and super happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's going to be a really interesting talk, and I hope to bring something back to the listeners.
I'm pretty sure you will. We just before this episode, which we're recording in the same room. Usually I have remote recordings, but we just stood here, discussed, and we started already kicking off with a lot of considerations, deliberations, and so I'm really, really excited and really sure this is going to be really, really fun. So, Thor, how do enterprises prepare themselves for a future of 10x innovation?
Yeah, that's a really good question because there's a lot of things happening at the moment. We see new models popping up just week by week, so it's impossible to keep up. But the way we try to do it at Novo Holdings is to discuss internally why we want to innovate. What's the purpose of innovation? What's it all going to end up with? And really have these ongoing discussions to be really clear on what do we want to achieve with innovation, because we've got all these opportunities popping up, week by week. But that's why it's so important to stay on track and really be certain on why do we want to do this.
So, yeah, is there really anything we can't do today?
Not really. In my opinion, it's only the human imagination that's the I wouldn't say problem, but showstopper, at least, because we've got so many opportunities. So the difficult part today is to be able to say this is actually what we want to do. This is what we want to utilize. This is how we predict our future.
So okay, so I'm just going to zoom out a little bit then, because we're here and I have prepared some high level questions for you throughout this talk, and I've had I think almost 35 episodes now of The Only Constant where I speak about AI. So is that even relevant? Let's just start there. Is it even relevant to speak about technology when we can do anything?
Yeah. Actually, I don't think it's that relevant today to speak about technology. I think it's much more relevant to speak about what do you want to do with technology. What's your ultimate, not even output, but outcome? What do you foresee in the future? Where do you want to be as a company and as a human being? What's your future service line gonna look like? And then afterwards say, well, how can we use different technologies to actually achieve that? That's much more interesting today, in my opinion.
But it's also annoying, right? Because now you're just going back to all the old stuff we used to do before 2022 November, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So is that what you see we're going to pivot back to, or is that what's happening? Is this something that you're seeing echoing also in the market in general?
I see two trends in the market right now, and the first one is that's my pessimistic side. A few years back, like 5 years back, we saw what I like to call innovation theater. That's when all the big companies decided to create a innovation unit, but not really do innovation. It was much more important to say, well, we want to innovate, but that's why we invented this innovation unit, but no one really ever did it. And my biggest fear at the moment is that all these companies today will create an AI unit and say that they're working with AI, but not really do it because they don't understand what AI actually is. So they'll keep doing the same thing they did 10 years ago, but not really utilize all the possibilities. And that's why I think it's so important to work with the digital imagination and digital awareness to make people across the organization see how can you actually utilize new technologies, but also make them able to see what am I actually working for in terms of strategy? What's my ultimate outcome? And not just output, but what is it actually we're
Mm.
striving for as an organization? And then use AI and other new technologies to improve that.
But it's double, right? Because there's also at some one point this calls for more bigger investments and looking deeper and bigger. But I think a lot of companies will also say that they've done these big investments. They've actually tried it with GSIs and everything.
Mm,
So but what's different? What do we want them to do differently now?
yeah. And I definitely agree. A lot of companies have invested a lot of money in tech, but again, from a tech perspective.
Mm.
So, from an IT perspective, buying hardware, software, and so on, but not really investing in the employees, saying what does it actually take from an employee side? How can we upskill our employees to make them able to actually use these new technologies? My favorite example is that you want to introduce a new tool, so you send an email with a link, and no one will open that email, and no one will actually press the link because it doesn't it isn't attached to what people actually work with. And
Mm.
I think we're still definitely missing that link today, especially in big corporations.
But then, okay, that also means that we take the people process technology to some extent. I actually made a hillbilly country song on Suno that sings about people process tech, just because
Yeah, yeah,
that's what you do when you give me access to Suno. Anyway, but that means that the problem is not really technology. That's what you're saying. The
yeah,
problem is people and processes. And I think yesterday I wrote to someone in a message on LinkedIn that, and this is just a thought. So I like to just push a thought out there that processes to some extent is always a specter of organization. It's a mirror of how you are organized. That's how your processes will look. And I've been thinking a lot over the last couple of months, and also longer than that, but especially over the last couple of months, that there's an issue with how we're organized, that we're still organized the way we were
yeah,
150 years ago. And to some extent, there's also this the rhyme and reason to, the CFO becomes the CEO, the CEO then becomes the board member, and then suddenly you have people who come from a finance background all the way, right? So we organized around the same ways of thinking all the time. And the CFO has this area of responsibility, the CEO has this, the CMO has this, and so on and so on. Is that the real problem then, organization, really?
definitely. One of the founders of liberalism, Adam Smith, he wrote a book called Wealth of Nations,
Hmm.
where he describes exactly what you're saying. That when you want to produce a chair back in 100 years ago, you would have different tasks for different workers, and it's the exact same thing we see today. So when we want to work with AI, I do this, my colleague do this, and other colleague do that. And the result is that we don't really innovate. We just keep doing the same again and again and again and
We
again.
sub-optimize inside
Yeah,
silos. We don't change. We don't transform.
exactly. We get exactly the same product as before, maybe just a bit faster if we are lucky. But if we are unlucky, we create new processes that we then have to unlock how to optimize, and then yeah, the wheels definitely keep spinning.
Silos within silos within silos.
Yeah,
Babushka dolls, right?
yeah, exactly.
Maybe that's a book, the Babushka Doll
The AI
Corporation.
babushka doll. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. But so 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 what I'm trying to, the innovation theater. I remember I saw that as well. I think that's a great way of putting it, and that is also to some extent, I think, what we're seeing today. I always say that people. Um, I play a lot of computer games. I've seen you said that before on the podcast as well. I actually don't play that much anymore, but I used to do. And there's always this, it feels sometimes like when you buy a chatbot, you're just buying a DLC,
yeah,
an expansion to, but you don't have the core game.
yeah.
So what would be the core game? What is it? What we're talking about? What are we actually talking about? Thor, we need to do.
Yeah, we need to figure out what is it we as human beings want to achieve with AI. What's the ultimate outcome we want to achieve?
Mm.
We've been talking a lot about the different outputs, productivity, efficiency gains, and stuff like that. But
Stuff that can't be measured, by the way.
yeah, 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 definitely. We like the good old KPIs that we can quantify and say this is how we measure a success. But to be able to use the full imagination and say this is actually what we want to achieve with AI. This is maybe a bit bit philosophical, but this is the good life. This is what we really want to achieve with AI as human beings, but also as corporations, and be able to say this is the ultimate end goal, and this is perhaps not just more of the same, but actually something bigger and something else, and be able to work with that entire value chain and
Mm.
say this is actually what we're trying to achieve, and also to say, well, if we want to achieve that truly, then it's gonna be a not just a long journey, but it's also going to require different skill sets than what we've got today. Because being able to drive a car doesn't make you a mechanic. So how can we upskill people, and what is it we want to upskill for? Because there's definitely some technical perspectives that we would want to upskill in, but there's also again the human side to be able to see how we as humans work with technology, and it's a different that's a different skill set than working with a traditional computer, for example.
Okay. You made me think a lot here, actually, because um, I always say that, don't focus on technology, focus on the problem. But there's actually three levels of this. There's the technology thing focus, then there is the problem focus, and then there is the future focus to some extent. And the problem is what you know right now, all right, and the future you don't know, and the future is uncertain. So what do we do about it? How do we go there?
Hmm.
I think that's an issue. That's an issue. What you're saying, we should look at what will it be in the future. Right now, it is absolutely unclear how the world will look in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah,
I don't have a clue. I don't think you do either.
definitely not.
So what are we even preparing for? And that's why I always go back to the problem, right? We said, solve the challenges that you know instead, and then you don't care. Technology, we put that aside already. So let's focus on the problem. But then I think, okay, if I look at the problem, and now I pull in some, not philosophy, but some psychology,
Hmm.
because I read some of the existential schools of psychology, or what do you call
Sartre.
no, actually, not that one, but the Abraham Maslow, the
Ah.
psychologist, where it's, instead of looking like the Freudian way of looking at the issue and then defining the healthy based on the sick. So the healthy is the one who doesn't have any sickness. He said, we should look at the hero instead,
Hmm.
and the hero is dynamic. So the hero will have periods of feeling low and up and low and up. So getting rid of that dynamism is not healthy.
Hmm.
That's just getting rid of disease. But what's left then?
Yeah.
So instead, let's focus on the hero. So my problem is right
Yeah.
now, I'm actually challenging myself, saying, looking at the problem is the Freudian way, and you're saying, let's see if we can do the hero. The hero is just so unclear, and it's filled with risk, it's filled with faults and wrong turns, and it's costly.
It definitely is, but that's also where the magic happens. Because I completely agree. I've always focused on the problem and really focused on not being technology driven for technology itself. And I've been doing that for more than 10 years now. And I'm still doing that. But I'm also increasingly putting more demand on my key stakeholders, saying to them, what is it that you actually want to achieve? That's not just the imminent problem, but the greater problem. What is it that you actually want to achieve with this? So putting more emphasis on the end users, but also making demands to the end users, making them reflect on what is it they actually want to achieve. Because I definitely agree on what you're saying, that we don't know what's happening tomorrow or in 10 years. But um, this podcast is called The Only Constant. And there's a philosophy, I can't remember his name, but he says that the only constant is change.
That's Heraclitus. Yes,
Heraclitus.
exactly.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
That's why it's called the only
yeah,
constant.
definitely. It's a great name. Great name. And I completely disagree with what he's saying, actually, because the only constant is change. Yeah, from an output perspective, but um, there is a saying that if a theory can explain everything, it explains nothing. But there's this theory of path dependency. Basically, it says that when you embark on a path, you'll follow that path forever until you have a critical juncture that will erupt you from the path, and then you'll choose a new path. And in my opinion, we have a strong degree of path dependency today when it comes to AI and new technologies. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to create at the moment more of the same. We're gonna have more of the same output again and again and again. So yeah, it's changed, but it's changed within the existing. It's the same path again and again and again until we get a critical juncture that will erupt us from this current path. And then the great question is, what's this critical juncture going to be like? I actually thought that all we are experiencing right now with the climate and climate change, it would make us as human beings see this as a critical juncture, but so far we haven't. So is it going to be a war, or what's it going to take for us to change that path? I think that's the really interesting question. So again, yeah, we've got a lot of change that's constant, but it's changed within the existing, and I think that's going to be the really interesting part when we're going to see some new change, a deviation from the current path we're on.
So you're giving me two options here to either go into the full scope of that and say, I think that I'm an educated historian, so I think actually to some extent that these critical junctures always, you also alluded to it, always happens when there's an external pressure to some extent, right? Something changing, that's the Soviet Union collapsed because there was an external pressure, not necessarily because the system didn't work. We don't know that, but they had to put so much energy into military and space exploration that just didn't necessarily make sense for the communist ideal of just giving people bread, right? So I'm not saying communists would have won. I'm just saying that external pressure creates these critical junctures all the time. And what if we don't actually have an external system to the current system? It's just all the same. When someone is making what do you call what was it called? These big investments in bonds that Europe did. What's that called? It's called can't remember the name right now. But the central bank invested heavily to keep interest rates low. They did the same in Japan. Did the same in US. Everyone did the same. The system was just the same. There's just one big capitalist market. Just there's nothing outside of it. It's just it keeps on consumption, right?
Yeah.
So what could be our external pressure?
Yeah, but again, that's a great question, because I think we've seen a lot of possible external pressures. But perhaps what's new when we talk AI, new technologies, is that this external pressure has to be so much bigger than what we've seen before, because AI and new tech is so powerful as it is today. Big tech is so powerful as they are. So perhaps the external pressure has to be much bigger than what we've ever seen before.
Is AI going to be an external pressure? Are we creating something that is going to mirror us and make us
it could definitely
identity?
be. If we ever see the introduction of real, what I call real AI, AGI, artificial general intelligence, that could be that external pressure. AGI being not machine learning, but real artificial intelligence, able to actually resonate and use human logic, and maybe even a logic that we haven't experienced so far. So that might be the actual external pressure.
That also becomes, you and me sitting here with our tarot cards, or
Definitely, I would love that as well.
Yeah, we can do that.
I did a tarot session last week. I love it.
Really? So, so when I turn this card, Thore, what does this mean? You know this figure. We're not doing that. Don't worry. But getting back to the other point, the path dependency, that also leads me to think that, can we even disrupt ourselves? Do we even, people talk about, this is a moment where you have to prepare for disruption. I've always been like, how can you prepare for disruption?
Yeah.
You can't, because you're entrenched in what you're doing. It doesn't make any sense, right? The reason they didn't, the companies were disrupted was because it didn't make sense. We make fun of them today and say, oh, they didn't know. Why didn't they see that? Because it didn't make sense, guys.
Yeah.
Right. And if it doesn't make sense, why would you choose it, right? Why would you choose something that doesn't make sense? So can we do that today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And
is that what you're asking your stakeholders?
Yeah, definitely that, and the innovator's dilemma, meaning if you try to innovate an existing company, you might end up
killing the company.
exactly. And are you actually ready to do that? And that's why I try to say that you have to be over prepared and understructured, so you're able to take in all the new technologies, and you're able to incorporate everything that comes as a new. There's a saying in Stoic philosophy that you don't get to choose what happens to you, but you get to choose how you react. And I think that's important as a company as well. So we have to be ready for new things coming up, and we also have to be ready to say, well, this is going to create a lot of disruption and new ways of working, and embrace that. And that includes all levels, employees and C-level as well.
That's actually is one of my key points as well right now, saying that modernization everywhere, people, technology, processes, that you need to go broad on that and just be modern, be ready on the newest, smartest thing you could do right now, because then you might be ready to adopt what's coming tomorrow.
Yeah.
But if you're holding out with some servers in the basement, you're not on cloud, and you have an old version of your ERP and CRM, you're not going to get the benefits. And then you have, just a 3-year project before you can even get to the benefits. And who knows what's happened in those 3 years, right?
Yeah.
So there's this whole, is that the same thing you're saying here, basically?
Yeah. But I'm also saying that there's also a cost in being first mover, definitely, because you can't be a first mover unless you're willing to make a lot of mistakes. So perhaps it's better to be a fast follower and learn from the mistakes, but again, be able to adapt and then use what you see in other companies and other technologies and actually utilize that. So there's definitely some value in being a fast follower instead of a first mover.
But how can you prepare for the future?
That's incredibly difficult to do, but I think the key point again is to work with your digital imagination and digital awareness, but again also to link that to your purpose, your desired outcome. What is it we actually want to achieve as a company? Again, going back to companies like Nokia or Kodak or Blockbuster. I mean, Blockbuster looked into the possibility of becoming a new Netflix, but chose not to. But then they made a conscious choice not to go down that route because they didn't believe that was the way to
Actually,
go.
Scott Newton on the podcast said that, I think it was him, he said that the reason they didn't do it was because they had all the ecosystem
Yeah,
of people who had DVDs on shelves.
Yeah.
They were like, no, you're not going to put me out of business.
yeah. Again, really interesting to see how the entire digital ecosystem works and how you have to make sure that you are ready for that as well.
My favorite quote is always this: the God maybe made the world in 7 days, but he didn't have an installed base, right? Installed legacy base, and it's both funny, but it's also extremely instructive, right? Because you entrench in the ecosystem, you entrench in applications, processes, people, everything. As long as when you get big, you can't just change.
Yeah.
So for me, it's all about that legacy base,
Yeah, definitely.
modernizing as much as possible.
Yeah, the legacy base, but also the entire ecosystem, as you say. There's this old saying that it takes a village to do something, and then a buddy of mine he says it takes an AI village to work with AI, meaning that you have to work with the entire ecosystem to actually grasp how can we make benefit of these technologies. And that includes every link. If you don't work with the employees, then this is not just a C-level project. This is a project for the entire company.
Heraclitus also said, by the way, that the only constant is change, right? But he also said later on, it doesn't just mean that you can't step into the same river twice, but it means that some things have to change to remain the same, like the river.
Definitely, but again, going back to Stoic philosophy, Marcus Aurelius said that you can't step in the same river twice because neither you or the river will be the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you still need to change to remain. Yeah. So is it even possible not to?
Yeah.
Whoa, we just went full classical here, Thor. And you're called Thor, so that's what we did in the Nordics, right? We went around with the thunder god, and while these guys were discussing philosophy, and that always amazes me. Actually, how could we live in those huts when just it's not Rome is not that far away from Denmark? but they were building palaces and they were thinking like this, and we were just running around. What were we do? What were we even doing? How can we not have? That's yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes the scale of that, you just accept it, right? Vikings are there and they are there, but they're really close to each other, right?
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
No, okay. So are enterprise top levels well equipped to discuss AI?
I think many of the C-level people that I engage with definitely are, and what's even more important, they have the
You have to say
willingness.
that, but let's imagine you're not in Novo. Some other companies you're talking to.
No, but that's why they hired me in Novo Holdings, because they knew they had to do something. They perhaps didn't know what to do, but they knew they had to work on this, and to be willing to see things from new perspectives. I think that's really really important. But I think what's even more interesting in this perspective is that there's this theory in political science that when you are young, you are really idealistic, and then you vote either really far left or far right. But then you get old, as the two of us, and you get a car and a house, and then you become increasingly conservative. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see if that's the same thing we're going to see at sea level, meaning that are things moving so fast that when the new sea level gets to be sea level, they will be lacking as well? Or how can we again create the ecosystem that ensures that the new breed of sea level will have the right tools when it comes to technical
It comes down
knowledge?
to, Thor, are you willing to destroy what you built?
Definitely, and I think that's gonna be really interesting. I think that's a lot of what I do in my job. I drink a lot of coffee with people, and I tell them I try to I wouldn't say preach, but at least say, well, this is what we have to do, and this is how this will affect your work as well. And again, there's a lot of really interesting possibilities out there right now with the new podcast functions coming up as well, so that are so easy to use, which I think is a that's actually an incredible game changer, that the UX and UI is so great today. So you don't have to be a engineer to work with these tools today.
Yeah, well, UX and interaction with it is the context issue is still there. Right? You
Yeah,
need to know, but the podcast thing is fun because you can get any topic turned into a podcast, so you can learn from listening to a podcast. But I still think that people want the authenticity of someone like you and me sitting here discussing.
yeah, definitely,
And then
definitely.
then if it doesn't bring that, it's not really intelligence. It doesn't bring the authenticity, and then it just becomes artificial. But if you know it's artificial and you say,
Mm,
okay, it's okay, I just buy it for artificiality.
yeah,
Art- Is it?
I think it's a word. I don't know.
That's a word.
Yeah.
Then it's okay, right? But I'm just, will people use that? That's
No,
my.
but yeah, in my opinion, that it's two different selling points. I think the new podcast version is it's great for material that I wouldn't otherwise read. It could be the annual report for some company that I wouldn't spend 10 minutes reading, but if I can listen to it, that's perfect.
Mm,
So that's a whole other game.
true.
Yeah,
There's a way
than
of communicating. It's still increasing the way we can.
yeah. Back in the days, I used to watch Beverly Hills each afternoon, and it's the same satisfaction. I would say that
So
I
you're
get.
saying, you're saying, because the thing is still, the attention thing is still the problem, right? But you're
Yeah,
saying that you would sit down and listen to an annual report from some company instead of watching Beverly Hills.
I'm that old. Yeah.
Yeah.
My point is more that I wouldn't
No,
say
wife, we won't watch. I can't watch this new series with you because I just have to read.
this after okay, this has to be cut out from the podcast because this makes me look way older than I actually. I'm not even 40 yet.
Oh.
Maybe 80 on the inside, but that's another. No, but my point is that I wouldn't call it empty calories as Beverly, but at least it's another way of consumption. So I will listen to it in the car if I'm a bit tired and I don't have the mental capacity to listen to something more challenging. Then it's actually fun, but it's definitely no. it's no match for a real podcast or real.
No, but just do we have the capacity to digest more? That's the key thing, right?
Yeah,
You get
definitely.
all the
And
content you want in the world, but you're still sitting on TikTok watching crappy reels.
yeah, and how do you choose? And again, going back to Netflix, they said that their competitor is sleep.
Mm.
Um, so we are constantly
Mm.
bombarded with all these opportunities. So how do you make a conscious selection? And I've tried buying a what's called a dumb phone, an old Nokia. That didn't do the job for me. I need to be able to use Google Maps and,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So, and yeah, with kids, you've got all these things going on in Aula. So you need to be able to communicate. So how
Aula
do
is a
you?
Danish
Oh yeah,
Danish school communication platform. Yeah,
yeah,
where there's a lot of messages there. Yeah, attention things, right?
yeah,
And
exactly.
also, and the thing we discussed before was, of course, Notebook LM from Google. Just so everyone knows that as well,
Yeah,
where you can create a podcast out of the blue. Um, but just going back to the top levels, right? If they are equipped to discuss this, I've heard statements from boards saying that we need 5 AI projects a year.
yeah.
Does that make even sense at all to put a number on it?
My initial response would be that it doesn't make sense because again, you have to work with why is it you want to work
Mm,
with AI. But actually, I would say to get this started, to get the imagination flowing, to show some use cases of how can you actually utilize AI, what can AI actually do for
mm.
you. Then it might be a good idea to say we're going to do 5 POCs and then let's see what happens. So it could definitely be a good way
But as a
kick
board
in.
mandate,
Oh, yeah, that's a great great question.
I'd say boards should have more interesting things to discuss.
Yeah, but you put it the right way. They should, but AI is still so new, and there's so much attention on AI that a lot of boards feel like they should be involved in this. But
Mm.
I definitely agree it comes too close to operations and too far from the
Yeah,
strategic
because
level.
also now you sort of we're going back to what we started in the beginning. You don't talk about technology. You said that
Mm.
as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Talk
definitely.
about, but now you're saying, oh, it's okay with the board goes and say,
Mm.
what is it? So what do you believe? What do you actually mean here?
Yeah,
What's it gonna be?
yeah, yeah. I have a background in political science, so of course I'll say both. I need a little bit of both, but but again, to create the spark, I can definitely see some interesting possibilities in saying, let's do 5 AI projects and see what happens. But again, of course, we also have to manage the expectations because let's say we do a POC of an AI project. What is it we want to achieve with that project? And how do we make sure that we don't put that POC into production and thereby creating a lot of technical debt? Because God knows I've done that a million times in my career so far. But I would hope that we're able to learn from our mistakes and make sure that we say this is a POC. Let's see what happens. But that's also the fun thing about AI and new technologies that we have to be able to say we're going to do a POC. We don't know what's going to happen. We hope this is what we're going to achieve, but we don't know. If we really want to work with technologies like deep learning and AI, we can't say this is what's going to happen. We can hope for a suggested output and outcome, but we have to be willing to live with that uncertainty as well. Um, so that's also why we see so many AI departments when it comes to the organization being a part of R&D, because that's the willingness to explore and
Mm.
take risks that a lot of companies see the necessity of.
Yeah, and some do. Let's get the Microsoft Copilot. Let's get ChatGPT. Let's just put a chatbot in there. Is that even the right? Is that a right answer?
I wouldn't do it that way. Again, you could say that might spark an interest in AI, but the negative side effect could be if you do it that way, that people will say, well, this isn't solving my problem, so it can't solve any problem in the world.
Mm.
So that's not for me. And I think that would be a
That's the thorough of disillusionment, isn't it?
yeah,
That's where we're
exactly.
going down the hype cycle,
Exactly.
down the valley. People are like, no, it doesn't work.
Yeah, that couldn't solve my exact problem, so that's not for me. And again, that's why user adoption is so critical in AI, and be able to see create this thought of what's in it for me. How can this actually help me in my everyday job? And of course, user adoption has always been critical, but I think it's even more critical in AI and new tech, because you've got all these possibilities. So how can I choose the right one for me?
I think that's some of the problems is that saying this is a chatbot, so you need to chat with it, and people are like, I've never had said before. There's a path dependency. We've
Mm,
never had to chat with a chatbot before, or you can now talk with your data. Okay, but I don't have a use case for that.
yeah.
Why should I talk with my data? So for me, I've been very focused on linking it initially, at least to automation, saying, okay, we already do automation, or we have some frameworks we're already working with. I don't know, websites. Stuff. Let's see how we can build it in to make that smarter, right? So creating something that does something that I can measure as well.
Yeah.
Because the other thing becomes they say that you will be more productive if you do it, but really then no one knows, because no one has, this technology's been out for 2 years, right?
Mm,
Almost not even yet, right? It wasn't there before. So no one scaled this over years, right? There's no insurance company, banking firms who's been doing this for 25 years in the basement, or something like that. This is brand new. It's novel. So do we even know? Do we even have scaled over time results on efficiency and productivity? No, we don't.
Definitely, and this is a whole new way of working. There's this saying right now that AI won't replace you, but someone working with AI will
Mm,
replace you. And I think that's definitely true. But what's also interesting in that is that people are much less willing to accept a mistake from the AI than from another human being. If I tell you something and it's the wrong thing I'm telling you, you're much more willing to accept that as a human mistake and say, well, yeah,
mm.
we'll both learn from that, and yeah. But if an AI makes a mistake, we are pretty fast as human beings to say, well, I can never use this machine again. I can never use this model again because it made a mistake. There's a lot of
And I always
yeah.
say this, and I think you love this perspective actually,
Mm,
because you the background you have and everything. But I always say that's because we have liberal rights as well, right? We've
yeah.
acquired that over years and hundreds of years, right? So the human rights is that you can make a mistake and won't kill you, but
Mm,
machines don't have that.
yeah.
If they make a mistake, we'll just kill them. It'll say, okay, this autonomous car drove into someone. Okay, let's kill the whole program.
Yeah.
Oh, but this human guy did it as well. Yeah, but put him in prison. Let's see if we can teach him not to do it again.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely, and that's really interesting because that's a complete shift of mindset we would have to work on, and again to also to say, well, okay, how can I then make this model even better? What's my stake in it? Is
Mm,
it there's a lot of talk of models hallucinating, for example, but are they actually hallucinating, or is it going back to my prompting that's just not good enough?
mm.
So how can I take responsibility and actually improve the AI or whatever it is I'm working with? That's really interesting. Again, if my car breaks down, okay, maybe not my car, but if my bicycle breaks down, I'll try to fix it myself, and if I can't, I'll bring it to a mechanic.
Mm.
And again, to take that responsibility as a user as well. I think that's one of the things we're going to need in the
So
future.
this is going to be, the big citizen developer boom. Finally, is that what you're saying?
Uh, it's not what I'm. It's more what I'm hoping
Mm,
for. We've been talking citizen development for years, but we've definitely seen an improvement in tools the last 5 years, both when it comes to automation, but also AI.
but is this going to then, is this going to then, what you're saying is this going to remove us from the loop? I don't. That's what you said. Also, AI is not going to take job of someone doing it. But so I'm saying, at least short term, people should look at human in the loop processes. So
Mm.
build things where humans are in the loop for all of this. But is that also then maybe the long term thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. That comes back to how much risk we're willing
Yeah.
to accept, because we don't actually need a human in the loop for a lot of processes today. We could trust the machine, But then we will also have to accept a certain number of mistakes, errors, and we're not willing to accept that today because we can't explain them. If a human makes a mistake, we can say it's a, yeah, in Danish we call it an error 40. It's a human mistake, and then we're all fine with it. But when a machine makes a mistake, we have this urge to be able to explain why did it make a mistake, which is completely understandable because we want to improve it. We want to say
Mm.
this is how we can then make it better.
It also impacts at what level we want to go for leading practice and just best practice. But best practice will be to say it's okay, it's making a mistake every now and then.
Yeah.
But leading would say we have to make the best service in every. But we don't do that anyway. So now we maybe just have to move it up. So say, okay, we can do even more now with AI, but on a less, but maybe less quality in all of it, or maybe more, I don't know.
Yeah, but it also goes back to the level of expectation, because we used to talk a lot about segmentation, creating different segments. But today we talk about a segment of one, meaning that every individual should be treated individually and get the perfect treatment for that person. So of course that creates a whole other level of expectancy
Yeah.
to what the AI can actually help with.
But that's also why, you use it where we can use more, do more, do a lot more that we're not doing. That's where, because if we put it, I work in a consultancy firm, so if I put it in to communicate with clients instead of partners, we'd soon die.
Yeah.
Because the personal touch is super important here in this connection, right? So it can't replace every human being, right? Or even not even a partner using it might be replaced with someone replacing someone else, because the personal touch is important here, right?
Yeah.
But some places where controlling of vast amounts of documents, of course, let's just do that. Let's see if it finds something we couldn't find, right?
Yeah.
So is that where we have to look a little bit more, maybe?
Yeah, that's definitely the first step. But I would also say that the lines are getting more and more blurred. I mean, there's this huge discussion, at least in Denmark, on whether or not what we're seeing when it comes to Midjourney and Suno and stuff like that, whether it's actual art or if it's just a replication of material. And I think that's really interesting. I think we're going to see a lot more discussions on that, because there's this saying that if it's technically possible, then it will be ethically viable. And I think we're seeing a lot more of that. When we talk facial recognition a few years back, we would never do that. Today, it's becoming more and more common as well. Before we started this podcast, the two of us also talked about this, this thing going on with the Danish police, where there's this possibilities of creating fake child pornography in order to catch these pedophiles. Should we do that because we can, or which other new ethical dilemmas does that create? I think
Yeah,
that's
and I
really
spoke to
interesting.
Save the Children about that, and that they can't use AI-generated children
Yeah,
either. It has to be real. People want real stuff there.
yeah,
But when you want real stuff, you're also getting the pain, and it doesn't, and especially in the police case, it's a really big dilemma. You're legitimizing something you don't want to see in the real world, but you're creating it artificially instead, right?
yeah.
That's really really difficult dilemma, actually.
It's a really difficult dilemma, but I think that we're going to see a lot of new ethical dilemmas popping up that we didn't even think of before.
On art, I always say, that and I used to write a lot of poetry when I was very young. I don't know if you know that.
Cool. No, I
I
didn't.
had tons of it actually. So I've done that as well. I used to say that it doesn't matter if you get a new tool, because it's always the artist behind using the tool. So the same way here, the prompter is the artist to some extent.
Yeah.
But there's this whole bell curve thing in AI, right? I discussed this with my wife as well. She said that I said that it can never create something that's not on the top of the bell curve, right?
Yeah.
They say, oh, it's just a matter of time before they figure that out. No, they can't. They just can't. You can prompt it to, but based on your prompt, it'll still make the most, what do you call it, average guess. So
Yeah.
could it ever invent cubism, right?
Yeah, I actually think that it could. I mean, if we use traditional machine learning, I completely agree on what you're saying that we'll never see anything new. But there's this old board game called Go. At least I think that's how you pronounce it,
Mm.
and it's one of the most advanced board games you can play in the world.
Yeah.
And Google first created a machine learning model that they used like a million old Go games to train the model, and it became pretty good, able to even beat the human champion. Then they used deep learning techniques, and there's this great video on YouTube where you see, I think it's move 37, and you see the computer making a move, and then the human, and he's the world champion, like 5 times world champion, and he turns completely silent, and the audience does that as well, because this move is so unordinary, so extraordinary than what you've ever seen before. And this guy, he goes out to take a smoke, because he's like, what the hell is going on? Is this brilliant, or is this madness? And then he goes back, and he ends up losing the game, because it's a brilliant move, but no human being has ever done that move before. But today it's a pretty common move, because the machines actually taught us that move today. And that's the distinction in my world between machine learning and AI.
I read that case as well. Also on actually in a book on AI
Yeah,
creativity. Maybe we read the same. I don't know if we did. But the point is that this, for me, it still seems like it's within these confines of the board, right? And then maybe you just expand the board, and that's
mm.
I don't know if yeah.
No, but again, that's just, yeah, confined to the board game. But if we at some point reach artificial general intelligence, then we might see this whole other way of actually thinking.
Yeah, the
Uh,
whole of existence becomes a board.
yeah, that's gonna be the question on what are the actual limits of the because again, that's taken from the human capacity, existing human capacity. But is there something bigger, greater than that? I don't know. Maybe.
But there's a but okay, but this also brings me to think, and I think Lorian Pratt said that, AI can't solve the climate crisis because it's too complex. Basically, she said that on the podcast as well, right? And she invented some machine learning transfer and decision intelligence. She's done, she knows her AI,
Yeah, yeah.
put it that way. But saying it has this weird scientific hybris of saying the whole world is intelligible to some extent, right?
Hmm.
Because the board game is that. Can we do the same with climate change, right? With everything that could happen.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know that's a sci-fi dream, right?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the question also then becomes: are we willing to do what is required? Let's say
Mm.
climate, for example. Are we willing to actually do what these models say is the right thing to do, or is it too costful to actually do it? And that's again where the intersection between AI and the human capacity becomes interesting.
But also on the Go game, what it did was not erratic, but what cubism might have been erratic.
Yeah, yeah, definitely,
So
definitely,
there's a reason it did the move because it won the game.
definitely. But it took the human mind hundreds of millions of years to get to cubism, and it took AI how long to solve Go, just to get the perspective as well.
Yeah, I don't think we'll get to the bottom of this right here, right? But Thor, by the way, sorry, Thor, no, Thor. Do you have an AI strategy?
We're working on that. We haven't finished it yet, because again, we want to make sure that it's deeply anchored across the organization. So it's not finished, and it will never be a finished product. It will be a working document we will get back to as we continue
But is
the
it
the
a
work.
business strategy, or is it a subset of some IT strategy, or what is it?
It's linked directly to the business strategy.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's again where I think AI, new tech, is. It's not corporate IT. It's something else.
Because I always, we also discussed this earlier that having, putting AI, a technology as the challenge. I think strategy should always be about challenges.
Yeah.
To some extent, focus on challenges and opportunities. So what you're doing is maybe seeing AI as an opportunity, or can it become a business strategy if you're not a technology company? I asked Scott Newton that on the podcast as well. Can
Yeah.
AI be a strategy if you're not a tech company?
Yeah, that's a great question. The former chief information officer of Danske Bank, he once said that the bank wasn't a bank. It was a IT company that happened to deliver a bank product.
Hmm.
So you can definitely integrate it deeply, but again, as you say, you have to look at what is this company actually trying to solve for, and then you can integrate it, and that would definitely be my recommendation.
Cool. So that's what you're doing with the strategy you're building as well.
Yeah, definitely seeing how can we utilize AI in the strategy, and how can we then also again pivot it and see, well, what are the opportunities that we didn't see before AI as well.
So it's more of a tactical approach maybe to solve business strategies.
Yeah, it's a mix of a tactical approach and a strategic approach, but also from operations as well.
So putting it online, you're not just the general saying we'll win if we have bazookas.
Definitely,
We need
yeah,
100,000 more bazookas. We're losing right now, guys.
yeah.
But if we got a million more bazookas, I think we'll win.
I definitely need bazookas, but I also need people on the ground saying, well, the enemy is using some sort of extra big bazookas, and we can destroy them by using a way smaller gun. So let's use a way smaller gun. So that's again keeping on track on what's happening across the
Mm.
company. So making sure that we are aligned. The worst thing that could happen for me is that people saw me like this guy sitting in the ivory tower, and then coming down from the ivory tower every now and then and presenting some product that no one actually
And
wanted.
pushing them chatbots all the time that
Yeah,
they
yeah,
don't use.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's good, and it also reflects on everything we've spoken about so far, right? What do we? And I think you already answered this, right? But I'd like to just because this was one of the pre-questions I defined here for the podcast. So, what do we like the most right now? Imagination or better technology?
That's definitely imagination.
Hmm.
We've got a lot of great technologies out there, but we're still trying to grasp how can we actually use them. What are we trying to solve for? So it's definitely imagination, and it's definitely trying to use that imagination in the right places, because again we are bombarded with opportunities. So be able to use that imagination in the right places. That's the
Th-
interesting part.
there's a definitely the supply side of technology right now is definitely trumping the demand side. So how do you feel about your LinkedIn feed?
um, how do I put this the right way? No, but there's a lot of. I think there's a lot of.
New model coming out.
Yeah, yeah,
Now we
yeah.
can do this. Did you see you can?
But I'm one of those guys as well. So I shouldn't I shouldn't say anything.
I did a post actually 1.5 months back or something where I wrote 10 use cases for business support.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the weirdest posts I've had because it only got around 200 likes, something, which is okay. It's not, but it had 250,000 impressions,
Shit.
which is usually would be around 2,500 likes.
Yeah, yeah,
So like, what's going on?
yeah,
And because I said use cases, and it had use cases, I think people read it
yeah,
and read it over.
yeah,
Didn't like it, but they read it and read it over.
yeah,
And LinkedIn knew they did, so it just kept on pushing. I was like, but
yeah,
what's going on? This is the weirdest post ever. I've this is ratio of likes to impressions,
yeah,
but this was just nuts.
yeah. But that's also interesting because sorry, but I actually didn't read that post. Otherwise, you would have gotten a like.
No.
I'll read it afterwards. But what's really interesting on LinkedIn is that if you actually have got something you want to say, that won't create the atmosphere or the traction that I actually want to create. But if I post a picture of me with my dog, that would create that, because that's so safe.
Even more a video with your dog.
Yeah, he's not ready for that.
People are definitely. I think people. I realize that also when I speak to people. A lot of people say, "Oh, I read your post. I thought it was interesting, but you didn't like it." And it doesn't matter for me, but but realizing that people read it and then they think about, but they're afraid to like it because their boss will see what they like. I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. Some people totally disregard what their boss will see, and I'm afraid. I don't know what bucket people will put me in, by the way, with my jokes and stuff like that. But the point is still, there's this. But what I want to say is that use case is saying that here's a demand side
Yeah.
that totally exploded in impressions, but it didn't. That was just a weird thing, right?
Yeah.
So people, there's tons of these. What's going on new, and I also sometimes find myself, okay, there's a news out. I should write about it. No, everyone else is doing that. Don't be that guy. Don't do that, right? Uh, yeah.
Yeah, but again, we need more people that are willing to say, well, this is my impression of what's going on, and this is the direction I think we should be moving in, because otherwise we'll see a lot of conformity and a lot of people and businesses doing exactly the same, and that's actually one of my worries as well, that we will see every company doing the same because every company is completely vendor locked in,
And
which is
weirdly enough, they have the same AI strategy, all of them as well.
exactly. So there's no freedom of choice, and there's no freedom to use your imagination. And that's one of my concerns on what we're seeing today, is that we are all converting into the same scheme and thereby creating exactly the same products.
But then also that's also because you if you okay there was I said I wrote poetry once. So one of my favorite Danish poets back when I used to write a lot of poetry was Søren Ulrik Thomsen,
Mm.
and he wrote a book at some point with a philosopher called Frederik Stjernfeldt called Kritik af den negative opbyggelighed, which means a critique of I can't translate it, but it basically, the point they made was that everyone is always good at criticizing. Everyone's ready with criticism,
Mm.
but very few are ready with taking the torch and going ahead, right?
Yeah.
Being the avant-garde and saying, "This, I believe in this."
Yeah.
So if you come and say tomorrow, "No, we're not going to build any chatbots,"
Mm.
then you'll have 5 directors saying, "But I just heard at this conference that we should do chatbots, and Microsoft is saying, and Google is, and then you'll be like, "Oh, yeah, the criticism will come your way."
It definitely will, but I have to do my homework and make them able to see what is it actually they are being presented. So they're being presented this chatbot, but what can it actually solve for? So again, I have to make sure that their level of digital imagination is sufficient for them to be able to see what's good and what's bad. But of course, also be able to be willing to stand up and say, well, this is like the old fairy tale from Hans Christian Andersen saying, "Well, this is not good. This is actually not what we need."
The emperor has no clothes on.
Yeah, the emperor has no clothes on. Exactly, and be able to put yourself on the front like that. I think that's also part of being a trusted advisor and not just a part of the supply chain.
But it is, I feel that myself, right? Uh, in the beginning, I said, this is not gonna, this. You need to know what you want to do. This will not solve everything, right? But it
Mm.
felt like it could maybe, and
Eh,
I felt so nervous saying that because I felt, what if I'm wrong?
yeah, again, but also to be willing to challenge your stakeholders and say, well, this is actually what you want, but this is not what you need.
In an
uh,
extreme hype market, right?
exactly, where things are moving so fast. And actually that's when I think of it, that's quite funny because the two of us, we know each other from way back when we both worked with automation. And
I think I've taught you RPA
yeah,
in the
yes, you
day.
did. You did.
In a very hot room, and we actually took our sweatshirts off. Not just you and me, other guys as well. But
Yeah.
this sounds weird, but it was really, really hot.
Yeah, I didn't want to talk about. I didn't want to tell a story about 10 naked guys. My point.
10 guys doing
Yeah,
RPA. That
yeah,
sounds
doing automation. My point was actually another point, but
good. Gonna get
that's
to that,
yeah,
please.
yeah. My point was that I like the project that we did together because you weren't afraid to challenge me and say, well, should you actually automate this process, Thor, or should you just kill the process and
Mm.
be willing to challenge your stakeholders and say, this is actually what you need. It is maybe not what you want, but this is actually what you need, and take that position as trusted advisor, because again, that's where new tech is still a new discipline, because like you said, everyone will know what a legal team does or a CFO does, but what's the actual value benefit from an AI team?
Mm.
You have to create that position for yourself, and I don't think you can do that by being too defensive. I think you have to be on the forefront and also say, well, we don't create an AI strategy for the AI strategy itself. This has to be deeply integrated in the top level
Mm.
strategy. So we shouldn't have a strategy house. We should just have one strategy, and AI is a really important part of that. But it's AI for the business. It's not AI for
So
AI.
should you more have a head of new tech instead of head of AI?
Um, yeah, you could say that, to make sure that you get the right synergies between the technologies. But what's even more important in my perspective is that you make sure that it's anchored at the top level. So you make
Mm.
sure you got the top level buy-in to work with this. That's the most important part, because there's still some translation going on. So make sure that it's anchored at the
But
very
then you
top.
also need to be able to put it into bullets, right? Saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? But the problem is you want to go down and say, okay, what's wrong with this process, and should we maybe kill it or do something different? Oh, did you put AI into this store? No. By the way, we fixed it with RPA, or we just killed the process. We fired the guy and hired another one, or Excel actually fixed it. We didn't know,
Yeah.
right? And that's and then boardrooms asking you, and you're answering them with Excel suddenly, and that feels slightly underwhelming, right?
Yeah, but there's an interesting duality in what you're saying there, because the one thing is that everyone wants to be working with new technologies and say that they were working
Mm.
with new technologies, but they also want to be able to not kill the hype, but be able to see through the hype and say
Mm.
we shouldn't overuse technologies. And I think that's really important to be transparent in that. I think there's a lot of AI washing going on at the moment, where people are saying that they are working with AI, but actually it's a linear regression model in Excel, which is great because it solves the problem. So why not just go with that?
I've had these weird sessions where I go and do my I have a speech I do every. It's working very well, so it's really good. But I always end up basically saying, look at your problems, not technology, and think about what you want to achieve, like we just discussed as well, right? And I tell people you're not behind because everyone is behind, so
Mm,
don't worry to some extent. But I also tell them that you need to modernize your core, and I say that very clearly as well. You need to get things moving there.
mm.
But people feel relieved, oh, thank God he didn't say, oh. So, okay, and maybe it seems like an anti-sale for me, right? That, no, you don't need AI necessarily. And then they're like, well, why do we need the AI lead then? But what I'm actually telling them is, hey, guys, you need to modernize your crap. And you still have an old NAV 2009. You still have, you don't have the latest SAP, right? Didn't you hear that?
Yeah,
you know no,
and
that's an
yeah,
investment. Just like, we don't, it's still working, the ERP is still working.
mm,
But all of the AI that's coming to your ERP in 2 years time from the big vendors, you won't get that.
yeah. I definitely agree. Focus on the foundation and reducing technical debt.
But
Yeah,
they know that problem,
yeah.
that's an old problem.
Mm. But we have to be able to sell them the dream and say, this is why you need to focus on the foundation and reducing
Mm.
technical debt, because as you say, that will enable us to work with new technologies and create a future that we can't see today.
Yeah.
But have the credibility to say that we don't know what the future is going to look like, but we have to be ready for it. I think that's the important dream we have to be able to sell.
So so now AI becomes the big what do you call mandate for modernizing and
Mm.
optimizing the things we wanted to do 10 years ago. But people said, no, we don't need it.
Exactly. That's my
For
like.
Microsoft, it's definitely, and Google is the mandate to go to cloud, right? Everyone has to go to cloud now. You can't get it without going to cloud. So they're like, and actually, sometimes I think that's why they're pushing AI so much, because finally people go to cloud, right?
Definitely. And I think it's really interesting that we do see some companies saying we don't need cloud. I mean, we're gonna go on prem, and that will be completely fine for us. But that does require that you are willing to take a lot of risk on.
Future
Yeah,
opportunities.
definitely, and also a lot of faith in your own capabilities to say, well, we can actually build something that's even better than what we can get off the shelf from the different vendors. And I don't think a lot of companies are really willing to take that risk or have the capabilities today.
No, but there's some things. I'm always a little bit double on storage, for instance,
Mm,
because it's so expensive in the cloud compared to on-prem. So maybe just make a hybrid cloud, but then you don't have it in the cloud, and then you can't utilize it in it, and then it all becomes that
yeah.
catch. But I just think they don't. They didn't. There was this promise of cloud that it was. We're not going to get into a cloud discussion, by the way, but there's this promise of cloud saying that now we're going to share our infrastructure with you guys. The
Yeah,
hyperscale is saying that, so the prices will go down, but suddenly prices stopped going down.
yeah,
And then you're like, guys.
definitely. But that again also goes back to us as consumers being able to do the specifications on what is it that we actually need, and then put that push on the vendors and say, well, this is my need, so I shouldn't pay for this. And I think that's a task we haven't succeeded in as consumers
Oh, it's really
yet.
difficult to be big enough to influence Microsoft and Google and Amazon, right?
Yeah, definitely. But I would also argue that we are not even able to do that yet, because we haven't got the full overview of what it is we actually need and what are
Mm.
then the possibilities. So we just buy off the shelf products instead of saying, okay, this is actually my need. So how can you fulfill that need? And I think that's going to be a change we're going to see in the future.
Get a very clear idea, Thor, that this is all about imagining what you want.
And why you want it.
So you're iterating back from a blue sky objective, or you're not iterating from the challenges only, but you're iterating from something out there.
Yeah.
And that's the blue sky objective then. We want
Um,
to be the biggest company in the world. We want to be more productive. That's blue sky. That's, what do you dream about? Being rich and wealthy and handsome and young forever, right? So,
no, but being rich and handsome and all that would be a desired output. What I'm hoping for is that we at some point get to the outcome level and say, I want to be the best human being I can possibly be.
mm.
And then how can I get there? I can get there by being over prepared and understructured. So all the time being able to utilize whatever comes my way.
So the objective becomes just being agile and flexible and prepared.
Yeah, again, to be able to spot the opportunities and then take full measure of the opportunities. Yeah.
Awesome, good answer. So I'm just curious to hear what areas you think are most ripe for AI right now, and obviously also what you might think is a dark horse that we haven't considered yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting possibilities right now. We've been talking AI in automation for a lot of years, with some great productivity results. And I definitely think that we are ready for the next step when it comes to the democratization of data and AI and automation. So to be able to use AI in automation across the organization, I think we're going to see a lot more. What's called RDA, robotics
Mm.
desktop automation, where we enable people to automate their own processes and enable them to use AI. And of course, that requires that we are willing to create AI communities where we help people, use AI in their daily job. But again, the interesting part then becomes how do we actually capitalize on that? So people will automate their own work, which will free up resources to do other stuff. But how do we actually make sure that that's a value add? I think that's the next part that we haven't really found the right way to do that yet.
I've always liked the idea of the citizen developer, right? My only problem with the citizen developer, which is this basically is right, making everyone more productive, is two things that I see: two megatrends, right? The automation megatrend and AI. I put that in that bucket, and then a cybersecurity megatrend on the other
Mm.
hand, where you want to control what people can be able to do and access, right? Because they can destroy everything if they do the wrong thing, right?
Yeah.
And also that you get more productive, right? But that Thor gets more productive doesn't mean that he aligns with his colleagues on what is the good productivity. And that's why you don't give everyone, super user access to SAP also, because what if they decide to do something that's
Yeah, I agree, but I would say that that falls back to the strategy, because if you have the right strategy that is lived across the organization, people will know what to do. I definitely agree that citizen development, there's the potential of anarchy, definitely, but
don't you
there's
think you have a lot of employees saying, if only I was allowed to?
definitely, and I would like to be optimistic on and say that if we give them that autonomy, we will see great products. Of course, there's again the risk of anarchy and cybersecurity, and we have to deal with that, and we have to make sure that we've got the right governance
Mm.
model surrounding that. But again, setting people free, if we've got the right strategy that is lived across the organization, that should be the end goal of automation.
Because I'm just, political science thing again. I'm coming back to, sometimes slow is a design. Like the EU is slow political machinery to not become, be taken over by Germany or something. Not France, someone else, right? And sorry to all the Germans out there, I really love you. But and the same with the American Constitution. Also, it has checks and balances all the time.
Yeah.
So, and we do that also in our companies. We build checks and balances everywhere to reduce the possibility that someone just messes it up or takes it over, right?
Mm. Yeah, and we've been able to build checks and balances in a lot of areas today. So of course, it's definitely
So, what if we
possible
have
to.
one department building up checks and balances and the other one building automation for everyone that's counteracting the checks and balances? To get what I'm
Uh, I
trying to make a problem here.
yeah, but I definitely get the possible problem. But again, I would say that going back to the strategy and the right governance model, if we've got these in place, there's still we're not gonna eliminate the possibility of someone going rogue and doing some crazy stuff. But again, that can happen in any area. So instead of looking all and saying that the pitfall is going to be the default option, I think we should be more optimistic and say, well, these are bright people that we're working with. Of course, they'll make the right choice, and we have to make sure that we enable them in making the right choice. But I think the possible the other outcome is even worse. If we say we can't take that risk, well, then we restrict people from actually doing their
Mm.
job, and then we in the end make them redundant.
Yeah, less creativity. Yeah, exactly. What if we
Yeah,
don't train them and they stay, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
Yeah,
That point, right?
yeah,
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, the new generations would expect to be able to do more. Older generations were more like, "Here's your role, do it, go home, have fun," right? But
yeah,
now you want to live your job
yeah,
and influence it and change it and all that thing, right? You need to enable them
yeah.
while you need to keep the company secure. So I just think that conundrum is really, really, really challenging, actually, if you take it face value, but also if you just include the cybersecurity people in who are, I think, less liberal than you are.
Yeah, definitely. But that's also why it's so important that you have cybersecurity people that are.
Or just data management people as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, definitely. But they should be focused on what are the possibilities. If we want to achieve this, how do we then do it?
Mm.
In my opinion, the really great cybersecurity people or legal people are the ones who are focused on creating the right outcomes. It's
Mm.
so easy to say no in that
That's what I
position.
said before. The critical, the no, that's just
Yeah,
being
yeah,
critical, right?
that's so easy. But the really good ones say, well, how can we get what you want to achieve, and what are the pros and cons, and what level of risk are you willing to take on this problem?
So the vetting process almost becomes the most important process in this.
Exactly, and that goes back to the ability to do the specifications and be able to say this is what we want to achieve. And I think that's one of the biggest problem when we talk not just AI but also IT, that we often not skip that process but neglect it at least, and that ends up making it difficult for the vendors because they think they have to deliver A, but what we actually want to achieve is B or
Yeah,
C.
exactly. That
Yeah,
happens all the time, right?
yeah,
And then you put it in contracts, and then you go complete different route, and suddenly things are locked into something no one's happy with, and
yeah,
or you buy this and they deliver on this little note in the MSA or whatever, right?
exactly.
But you must have taken on quite a challenge then, doing this and being that liberal
Yeah, yeah.
mindset in pharmaceutical.
Uh, Definitely, but in Novo Holdings, of course, we have a lot of processes to make sure we stay on the right path, and we don't take unnecessary risks. So we've got a lot of processes for that
Mm,
when it comes to investments, and of course we should. I'm very aware that I need to work with people that are way different than me,
mm.
that will spot all these pitfalls that we have to make sure that we are aware
Compliance
of.
issues and stuff like that as well.
Definitely, and then make a conscious choice on whether or not this is a risk we want to take. But to be able to at least have that discussion, I think that's the first step, because I would say people like the two of us, we get like 100 ideas a day, and 99 of them are really bad. But the one idea that is perhaps not
Maybe for you, but
definitely for me, but the one idea that's not completely bad, we need to be able to discuss that with people that are not like the two of us, that will see, or not like me at least, that will see the pitfalls, and then let's have that
yeah, I always
discussion.
like to say, give me all of the restrictions,
Yeah,
because then my neural network can try to find a way to play Go with you and beat you.
exactly.
So I actually enjoy that more than anything. And it goes back to I think there's been a lot of Danish references today,
The
but
movie.
the Fem Benspin,
Yeah,
the five obstacles by Lars von Trier, and you
exactly.
knew I was going to mention
Yeah,
that,
exactly.
where he has to make his Lars von Trier has to make the perfect human over and over, is the perfect menneske, his movie over and over, and every time he gets an obstacle from Lars von Trier, and every time he gets an obstacle, he makes it better because he works under
Yeah,
these restrictions. But then the fastest final challenge is there's no restrictions,
yeah,
and that's the worst challenge ever. And he makes a crappy movie because it's not productive.
yeah,
So telling me what, just don't say no, but
yeah,
just say you need to adhere to this, that,
yeah.
and then we can use our bubble brains, popcorn brains, or what we call it, for that, right?
Exactly, and then find an answer in that, and I do
Prompt
exactly.
me with the entire context, please.
Yeah, exactly. But the problem is people are usually not able to do that. So another way to do it is to think, okay, this guy, what would he say to this solution? Well, he would say that you're missing this and this and
Mhm.
that. And I think yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah.
So I just, I think this has been an absolutely brilliant episode, Thor. And I've really, really enjoyed having you on the Only Constant so far. We're not done yet, but we're almost done. So, because now we get to the final point, which is the final piece of the podcast. Everyone else has answered it, and now I want to hear what your answer is to this. Are you ready for it?
Definitely.
So, Thor, what is the only constant?
Yeah, we already talked a bit about it, of course, and I will go back and say the only constant is path dependency. And what's going to be really interesting in the future when we talk AI is what's going to be that big external pressure that's going to change the current path we are on. I think that's going to be the biggest game changer in the industry, and possibly also in human history, because AI has the potential to be a far bigger disruptor than electricity or steam power or any of these great technologies. But I think the make or break is going to be, will we see that big external pressure, or will we actually see a new kind of external pressure where we see a single human being creating that external pressure? Will we see the first one-man unicorn company, for example? Will Elon Musk, just to give an example, be that one person that creates that external pressure? I think that's going to be the make or break of AI we'll see in the future.
That's a great answer. Path dependency, and trying to figure out what is the critical juncture of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Thor, and thank you so much for being on The Only Constant. It's been a real pleasure.
Likewise.
You've listened to The Only Constant, a podcast sponsored by Basico.